Welcome to episode number 38 of the First Responder Wellness Podcast. My name is Conrad Weaver, and I'm so grateful you've joined us. Today's show is sponsored by the PTSD 911 documentary and educational toolkit. If you want to get your people talking about health and wellness, this film is a great tool to accomplish that. Order the film and toolkit during the month of May and get 10% off with coupon code MAYSAVE10. Order it today and join the dozens of agencies across the country that are using this as a vital part of their wellness training. Visit ptsd911movie.com/toolkit. That's ptsd911movie, all one word, .com/toolkit. Today is May 15th, and it's Peace Officers Memorial Day. So I think it's appropriate that today's podcast covers a topic that is sometimes not discussed among law enforcement, and that is the subject of cancer. My guest today is Vickie Speed. Vickie is the founder of Blue Cancer Connect, whose mission is to show empathy, provide encouragement, and offer support following a life-altering diagnosis of cancer. Vickie knows this journey firsthand as she fought alongside her police officer husband, Mitch, in his cancer battle in the face of fear, grief, confusion, and the overwhelming disruption of their lives, then to face the long-lasting and devastating loss of her life partner. Vickie's journey out of the pain of her loss has blossomed into a passion for helping others, thus founding Blue Cancer Connect. Stay tuned for my compelling conversation with Vickie. Hey, if you're enjoying this podcast and think others would too, be sure to subscribe and to share it with your friends, family, and coworkers. Our mission for this show is to bring you content that inspires you to develop a culture of wellness so that all first responders can thrive and have a successful and meaningful life. So whether you watch on YouTube or listen on your favorite audio app, please subscribe, and I'll be ever grateful. Thanks again for listening and watching, and now here's my conversation with Vickie Speed. Well, Vickie, welcome to the First Responder Wellness Podcast. It's so great to finally meet you.
Thank you. It is so great to be on. Thank you for reaching out. I think this cause is really important.
Sure. Tell us a little bit about yourself. What's your connection to first responders?
Well, I am the widow of a detective from the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department. My background is actually project management, accounting. I did that for, I don't want to say how many, or 30 plus years, because I'm going to age myself. So I've always, had that business side, and I've always worked, always had a career. But my husband was a 16-year veteran at the time that he passed.
And so, what was his background like, and what led to his passing?
Kind of crazy. He came from construction also. He was a heavy equipment operator. They had a family business, and we got married. I always say this: when we got married, we have this perfect dream of taking the family business, the perfect 2-story house, the white picket fence. We had everything laid out, and none of it turned out that way, unfortunately or fortunately. But at the age of 20, he actually had approached a law enforcement officer and told him, this is my dream to do this job. And I remember he told him, don't bother, you'll never make it. So it was a kind of a hidden dream for my husband. So my husband was one of those people that didn't get on the department until his mid-30s. And at the time, we'd already been married, I think 5 years. We had a 2-year-old, and he actually went and applied for the sheriff's department without telling anyone, myself included. I didn't even know he did it. He came to my office the day that he tested. He came by my office and he said, I need to tell you something. And, I thought something happened to our son. And I said, what's that? And he said, I just applied for the LA County Sheriff's Department and I passed, and I have to be back in the morning. So that was the beginning of a journey. It was really a dream for him. And, I believe being a first responder is a calling. It's not something you just wake up and decide, it's be a really cool job. So he definitely had a calling in his life, and he was really good at what he did.
And so what was that like for you, being the spouse of now a law enforcement officer? What were the challenges you faced in that position?
I tell people, I believe had he got on the department either before we were married or earlier in our marriage, I don't know that we would have survived it. We had already been through some really difficult times. He was actually an up and coming country singer. He was pretty close to getting signed before he made this decision while he was working. And so we already had challenges. You know, he wasn't home a lot. Just the whole scene of a band, you know, gone every weekend. We're raising a child. So I think we had already been through the toughest part of our marriage. So when this came about that he wanted to apply for to be a first responder, I did come from a family of first responders. So I had a brother, a sister-in-law who were already on the job. I knew what came with that. Unfortunately, my brother was one of those people that had been divorced 4 times. So I kind of saw this. And so we had a really tough discussion before he graduated and before he went into the academy about what our life would look like. And I know not a lot of first responder wives or families get that. But, you know, I had to tell him what I would tolerate and what I wouldn't tolerate. And thankfully for us, it was never an issue and it was never a problem.
Mm-hmm. And so in the course of his career and your life together while he was in law enforcement, you know, what evolved in that? How did his career evolve? And then ultimately what led to him, you know, passing away?
Well, you know, he actually fast tracked his career. You know, like I said, I think there's just people that are meant to be in this job. I believe he was one of them. He was made for this. And, you know, he came from a time where you had a lot of street smarts. You grew up very tough. It's very different now. But, you know, he grew up a tough kid, an older brother who beat up on him, always around older guys, played sports. You know, it wasn't back then. It wasn't everybody got a trophy and a medal. You had to earn everything. So he was a really tough guy anyhow. And so I think that brought a lot into this job so when he graduated the academy, in LA County, you go straight to the jails. He was in there about 3 years, really met some amazing men, lieutenants and above, who really gravitated to him and wanted to help him in his career. So when he came out to patrol, just everything fast tracked. He did his time on patrol, and you know, I know he struggled with this, but they put him on a team within a year, which is unheard of. He was a little hesitant to do it, you know, because you know that's not always well received, but he did it, and his career just kept fast tracking and fast tracking and fast tracking. So he spent most of his career on specialized teams, whether it was burglary, robbery, assault. You know, he was involved in a lot of murder cases. One of his specialties was interviews. That's what he was known for. He could get confessions. He was the interview guy. So, you know, as a wife, I was really proud of him. Obviously, I don't know this job, but very well-respected man of God, which most, you know, keep that close to the vest. My husband didn't. He just prayed with the guys, you know, shared marriage, shared life, shared just life experience, I think. So I think he brought so much to the department and so much to his partners. And that's really what he was known for and remembered for. So in 2016, my husband actually had been a runner his whole life. He was actually invited out of high school to the Junior Olympics, to kind of give you an idea of his running career. 6 weeks after Baker to Vegas, he hadn't been feeling good for a while, came by my office, and he said, I don't feel good, but he had closed my door. And I always, you know, joke about this. When a man says, I don't feel good, we don't know exactly what that means. But my husband actually didn't look well. He was very jaundiced and his eyes were gray. And so I asked him, what do you mean you don't feel good? And he said, Vic, there's just something really wrong, and I don't know what it is. So we were very fortunate. We had, I was born and raised in the community I live in. My husband was raised in a community right outside of here. So between his job and that, we knew a lot of people. And our doctor was a very dear friend of ours. So I made a phone call and he said, hey, let's, you know, get him in. Let's get some tests going. I didn't think a lot of it. They started testing. We went in the following Friday and we walked in. And I realize now my husband knew what was going on. I had no clue. And they said, we need to get Mitch into the City of Hope right away. Well, the City of Hope is one of the biggest cancer hospitals here in actually in the nation now, but here in Southern California. And it still didn't occur to me. I had really had no interactions with the City of Hope. I didn't know anybody that had been there. Cancer didn't run in our family. So I remember looking at my husband's face and then looking at our friend's face, and where you're just like, what is going on? So we walked out the doctor's office, and my husband grabbed my hand and he said, you need to listen to me. We're not going to ever ask God why. We're going to ask God to use us and whatever lies ahead. And I was like, okay. And I thought, God, what did I miss? A couple weeks later, we got in, they did the biopsies. Memorial weekend, we got the phone call. My husband was diagnosed with a very aggressive stage 4 cancer. It was prostate cancer. And, the signs and symptoms were there. He thought it was the job. He thought it was the stress. He had just turned 50. He was on a team of 30-something-year-olds, and he thought maybe he just couldn't keep up anymore. So in 2016, that was the beginning of a cancer journey. And unfortunately, 26 months later, my husband passed. Fought hard, but didn't make it. So in 2018, I became a widow of a first responder, which never saw that coming. But, it's the path that God gave us. So that's the journey that I'm on now.
Well, I'm sorry for your loss.
Thank you.
And for those challenges that came out. What has come out of this for you?
Well, I think the first thing I like to talk about is grief. I thought, and people have said this, oh, you're so lucky you got to say goodbye. Well, I don't know if there's any lucky in grief or loss. I didn't do so well with it. My son didn't do so well with it. And, I have strong faith. I'd like to believe I'm a very strong woman, but I think it's something you're not prepared for. So it plunged me into a pretty dark place. And, my life had been ripped out from underneath me. What was normal, my husband getting up and going to work, me going to work. I had already made a decision to take a year off of work to try and heal, to be a mom. And I really didn't know the darkness that this was going to bring. So I started therapy pretty shortly after he died. And I actually still have the same therapist, God bless her. Did a lot of EMDR through those years, swear by it. I think it saved me. I tell people that. But I think grief is something you're really not ready for. And I don't care how it happens. The pain is so extraordinary and so real. And I knew I had to pull myself out of this dark place, and I knew I could. I just didn't. I always say there's no book on how to get out of it. There's no book on when you have loss, here's the 10 steps of how you get out of grief. And it's different for all of us. And I have also learned that. So I spent the first 3 years really fighting my way out of that. I also went out and talked about marriage, about first responder marriage. I started doing that. I felt very compelled. My husband and I did have a rough patch when he started getting on these specialized teams, because he was never, typical, never home, felt like I was a single mom. We went through that and we made it through. And thank God when he passed, we had an incredible marriage. We'd been married 30 years. So, very grateful for all of that. But I just kept telling myself, maybe it's marriage. Maybe I should help first responder marriages or help young wives or help. And it was fulfilling, but it wasn't fulfilling enough. And I knew in my heart, in the back of my mind, I wanted to talk about cancer. I just didn't know if I would ever be ready. So on November of 22, I got a phone call from 2 of my husband's old partners who were now lieutenants. And they had shared with me that one of our deputies, 28 years old, had been diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. They were trying to do some fundraising and some other things. And would I be willing to help? And of course, I said yes right away. Well, they had planned a big drive-by with LA County sheriffs and LA County Fire by his house. They were going to present, some items, a check, go to support him. And he happened to live near me. So I thought, of course, I'm going to do this. So I went out there. And I remember he walked out of his house through his garage, and he was with his mom and dad and his sister. And I saw this, I still can remember it. I saw this frail 28-year-old young man fighting for his life, who now had double stage 4 cancer. He maybe weighed 100 pounds, and my heart was shattered. And I just remember I had tears just completely flowing down my face. I put my sunglasses back on, and I didn't want this to be about me. So I backed up, and I just kept looking at him. And I realized in that moment, I had to do something, and I had to say something. His family was on this journey alone, not knowing what they were walking into, what to expect. He didn't know what to expect. And I knew then when I left, when I pulled out of his driveway, I knew I had to do something with cancer. So that was actually the deciding factor for me.
What is it that you wish you would have had or known or learned previous to your husband's diagnosis?
I don't think we understood the exposures as first responders because we don't talk about it. We don't talk about the risk of cancer as a first responder, especially in law enforcement. I think my husband and I were so strong together and so supported by our department. I really didn't have like any complaints or actually it's quite opposite. I commend the LA County Sheriff's Department for just the love and support that they even continue to give my family. But what happened is when he passed, you have so much time to look back and reflect on your journey. My husband was treated so well by the City of Hope, our community, our department, his partners. And I just thought it was like this for everyone. And I saw how much that took off of me. Because his partners were there for him, it allowed me to continue working. I worked full time until 3 months before he passed because they were there. They gave him a ride. I would meet him at his appointments. They were there for chemo. So this really took a lot off of us and off of us financially also. But I realized that I had to go through this journey alone. And I was okay with it. I don't know that you even have time to stop and think like what your needs are, because my only priority was my husband. And I do remember, you cry, you learn to cry in the shower. You learn to pray privately. You learn to fight privately. You carry a lot of pain. I can remember when he first got diagnosed, I think every day I thought I was going to get sick. And you just carry it. And you're like, this is the journey we have been given. So I wish I had had someone to talk to. I wish I had had someone that could tell me what to expect or what this would look like, both good and bad. And I didn't have that. So my reflection back was, I started saying, what if? What if someone had shared with us what cancer looks like? What if someone was talking about cancer in law enforcement? What if another wife could have maybe given me an idea of what this looked like or what to expect? And those were just questions I kept asking myself. And I knew I had to do something.
I know that in the fire service, cancer is a big issue because of the exposure they have to all these toxins and fumes and things that are, involved in fires. But often we don't think about law enforcement having exposure as well. What are some of the things that cause that exposure with law enforcement?
I was actually with our department yesterday and we talked about this. Our law enforcement officers are at the same incidents that our firemen are. They are at fires. Mm-hmm. They are doing evacuations. They are at car accidents. We have the drug side of it. And we've asked ourselves, why don't we talk about law enforcement? I love our firefighters. I think what they've done with the side of cancer with them is absolutely extraordinary. But looking at that and looking at what they have and what they've been given and what they continue to have and the attention that, especially now, the attention that's been given to it, Why haven't we done this for all first responders? And for me, it's law enforcement because it's so personal. But, my husband did so many things in his careers. He was at car fires, which is an exposure. He was at drug busts. They work in old buildings. A lot of them are filled with lead and mold. We don't talk about that. The jails, my gosh, our jails, some of them are, 200 years old. We don't talk about any of that. We don't talk about the shift work, the lack of sleep. We're not made. I can remember the doctor telling him, you are not made to work nights and sleep during the day. Our bodies are not made for that. That's what vampires do. And I can remember hearing that very early in his career. And I thought it was funny, but, then it made sense. You can't have a strong immune system if you're never out in the sunlight. You can't have a strong immune system if you sleep 4 hours. I know when my husband was on the teams, it was 24/7. You had to answer your phone at all time. If it didn't matter if it was 3 a.m. If a burglary was happening, you had to get up and go. So, these are so many things that do fall into that exposure, and we don't talk about it. And, like I said, I love our firemen. I love everything they have. I love what they've been given, but you have to take a look at that. And for me, it was, why don't law enforcement officers have the same thing? Why has no one brought this up, but why are we not talking about it? So that's really a role I think I've taken, maybe just kind of put upon myself, but I think it's very, very important.
Do agency leaders or let me ask this, what do agencies provide, training, teaching, anything regarding to cancer in law enforcement?
Well, this nonprofit's we've only been around a year. Obviously, cancer was not new to me. But what I had found is there are not resources for law enforcement. But on the other side of that, agencies have been so welcoming. They've actually come to me. I don't have to go find them, asking, how can we start having cancer conversations? The uptick in law enforcement with cancer right now at a very young age is like nothing we've ever seen. And we just keep hearing cancer, 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 but it's the 30-year-olds, the 32-year-olds, the under 40. Whereas we used to always say we thought it was an old people thing, and it's not that way anymore. Or it was at the end of your career or after you retired. We're not seeing that anymore. So I think it's not even me having to bring the awareness. It's the fact that cancer's hitting so hard. I actually am so grateful, and I will say this, agencies are so welcoming to this conversation, and I am very, very grateful for that.
What's a conversation like that look like for you when you're talking to a leader within law enforcement? What are you telling them? What are you sharing? Obviously, we're not going to give away, things that you don't want to give away, but what do you share with them?
Well, I always say our biggest thing is education, awareness, and screenings. And what do we do? What do we do to allow our officers to receive an early diagnosis? Because that's the ultimate end goal. How can we get them diagnosed earlier? How can we get them back to work and allow them to finish their careers? Because that's really, why you're doing this job. Is your ultimate goal is to finish your career, retire, and enjoy what you've worked so hard for, which is your retirement. So we bring in those pieces. But, with law enforcement, it's, I said this yesterday, they're used to going in and saving people. They're not used to being saved. And I think that's any first responder, not just law enforcement. And they have that Superman cape mentality, but that's what it takes to do the job. But with cancer, the cape comes off. It's very raw. It's very real. And I think when I went into law enforcement, I realized you have to have a little tougher conversation. There's no sugarcoating this. Our first responders don't respond well to, sweetness and beating around the bush. And I think there was a misconception as a wife or a widow. I think they thought the conversation would be, oh my gosh, I lost my husband. I just don't want this to happen to anybody. And, I come from a world of working with all men anyhow. So I knew to go in and do this, you had to have a really raw conversation. And that's, I'm thankful they allow me to do it, but that's what they're receptive to. So that's really what we go in with.
What's been the response of some of the people that you've talked to that you've had in your sessions? What's been their reaction to what you're sharing?
Thankfully, amazing. I actually was at 2 stations yesterday here in Southern California, and I got 3 emails last night just thanking us for having this conversation, thanking us for bringing awareness. One of them was a sergeant that we actually, Blue Cancer Connect did assist in the middle of his cancer journey. And yesterday was the first day that he shared his testimony. He just returned to work. It was very, very emotional, but those are the things your partners need to see. Those are the things that people need to understand is what does cancer really look like for our first responders who are so tough on the exterior, and on the inside too, because the job hardens you. And so when things happen that drop you to your knees, like a cancer diagnosis, and make you fragile emotionally, mentally, physically, are you prepared for that? So I am extremely grateful that I have had no pushback. I think if anything, we've just been welcomed at every agency throughout this nation. When you start having, police chiefs or, mayors reach out to you because no one is talking about this in law enforcement, I think that's where I realized, we were really onto something important and valuable that our first responders really need.
How much can having perhaps a cancer screening, how much can that help someone who's maybe fearful or maybe has this maybe in their family? How much can that play in someone's mental health and saying, okay, I've had this screening, I'm clear. So, for me personally, yesterday TMI here, but I had a colonoscopy, and just hearing the results from the doctor saying, hey, everything's good, made me feel so much better. Made me feel like, okay, I'm good. I'll have another one in 10 years, but I'm good for now. How much can that play in the role of someone who's having a cancer screening and getting that good report?
I think it's really big. I actually have a piece of my own life to share. I'll get to that in a minute. But I think what, for our officers, the things that they don't understand, and this is why the education is so important, is if you do have a family history, you can qualify for genetic testing. We don't talk about this. I didn't know about it. I had never heard about it. I'm still, just completely in awe that this even exists, but there's a lot of genetic testing out there. And if you have that family history, I highly, highly encourage it. Yes, you are going to hear things you probably don't want to hear, which is you have this gene or you have this chromosome or you have this, whatever it is. But I want to encourage people to get that early diagnosis. And, we shared yesterday, and this is from the American Cancer Society, with a stage 1 or 2 diagnosis, your chances of dying are 18 to 30%. With a stage 3 or 4 diagnosis, your chances of dying are 85 to 95%. That is a huge gap. And, I've shared with them what my husband's cancer journey looked like at the end. It's not something that I love talking about, but cancer eats you from the inside out and you can't stop it or control it. So why would you ignore this and go down that path or go down that road when facing something, yes, very painful, and you understand the possibilities. But if we don't talk about it, we now leave it as, like with my husband, a stage 4 diagnosis that's a complete shock that ends your life, that my husband never made it back to work. It ended his career. Why would you choose that? So I believe that's why this conversation is just so important.
Mm-hmm. So, where do we go from here? What's something that someone in law enforcement, what's step one for someone to do regarding this?
You have got to go get a physical, a yearly physical. I know a lot of these doctors don't want to do it with young people. They push it out. You have to not take no for an answer. I believe as any first responder, the minute you get on this job, we should be talking about how important these yearly physicals are, and we should be encouraging them. I know fire really encourages them, and law enforcement, we really don't. And we need to change that narrative. So it really starts there. And you have to push for things. I know for women, it's your annual. They always tell you, oh, you're too young. Oh, you should wait. It's not true anymore. We're seeing cancer. I believe the age right now is 18 to 34. So there is no more waiting.
Wow.
And, like I said, we have this perception that, oh, once you're over 50, you should be concerned. That's not true anymore. Those numbers are completely gone. And as a matter of fact, the American Cancer Society put out all new screenings and all new ages because everything has dropped by at least 10 years. So they're actually encouraging you to get, screenings at age 30, age 35. There's no more waiting until you're 50. So I do believe with that. We need to talk about physicals. It's physicals, but we need to how do we start figuring out how can our officers get in for physicals? Because we understand the other side of this is, they're worked to death right now. I know in LA County, our average overtime is 100 hours a month, and it's not an option. So how do we get them in to get these physicals so what we have done is we've actually gone outside of cancer and we have started partnering with our general practitioners to get our officers in when it's accommodating for them. So we have been very blessed that we have doctors that will keep their practice open later or come in earlier or clear their schedules to fit law enforcement officers in. So we've gone a little bit outside of cancer with this, and we just feel like, it's your health. So what can we do on a bigger scale in a bigger picture to avoid that cancer diagnosis? So we are seeing a lot of doctors, just say yes. What can we do to help them? We love them. We appreciate them. I'm in. Here's my cell number. Call me. I've been at briefings and I've called doctors on their personal cell. Hey, I have 2 officers here right now, 40 years old. They've never had a physical. Give me their schedule. I will come in. And we see a lot of that. And, that's where I continue to tell you that we've got to start talking about how important physicals are, because that's really where it starts.
Mm-hmm. So speak to those leaders, those first responder leaders, those fire and police captains, lieutenants, those who kind of make the schedules, for agencies. What can they do to help facilitate, giving officers chances to go get physicals?
Well, first it's the conversation, but I think a lot of it is, and it's not a put down to any agency, but we're human beings and we've got to care. We've got to care what happens to these officers. I believe these men and women are your responsibility, especially in a leadership position. And that's in any job. It's in anything you do. I just believe you've got to talk about it. And I think that's why yesterday I saw it. We're actually having station captains reach out to bring us in. Well, the look of me coming in is different when you have your captain standing in front of a room introducing me and talking about why this conversation is so important and how happy they are this is happening. You look around the room and you can see with these deputies, it's different. It's received different. It's you can tell by the look in their eyes that they feel like they're being supported. And I think that's what needs to happen. It needs to come from the top down, not from the bottom up. So I do think these conversations have to come from the top. And, I think it's in anything when you see your leaders, saying, hey, we care. Not only do we care, but we're going to bring in resources for you and support it. I think that changes a lot of things for our law enforcement.
Mm-hmm. And I really think it also needs to be something that's not just a check the box thing. We're gonna do this, and you get your physical. We're gonna check the box, but really make it part of the culture of the organization.
I agree with you. I know with our firefighters out here in LA County, they get I'm not sure exactly how it works, but there's a percentage they get every year when their physical is complete. So it was something that was done through the union. I think that is the greatest thing ever. They want you to go. They want you to get body scans. They encourage all of this. And we need to start doing the same thing. Yesterday we were talking about this really needs to be introduced at the academy level. That when you graduate the academy, because you're, young, most of them are very young, we don't prepare them for their health. We don't prepare them for you can receive a cancer diagnosis. You are in a lot of exposures. I call it law enforcement is the perfect storm for cancer. It has been, but it's more so now than ever. But, so I say top down, but I do believe at these academy levels, we need to start talking about health on a much broader level.
Mm-hmm. Do you think also nutrition has a big part of that or plays a role in that? Because I know a lot of first responders that I know, have said that, they don't eat well. They're just grabbing stuff from the 7-Eleven or whatever. And there's not a good plan for a good diet. How much does that, play a role in perhaps cancer?
I think it plays a role in cancer, period. I think our food has changed so much for any of us. Mm-hmm. I think what they put in it, what they use, it's something we should all be scared to death of. But I do agree. I do remember my husband being at out here, it's AM PM. It's like the worst place ever. Picking up a hot dog and a Coke so I actually learned as a wife, and that's why I said I think it's important at the academy level. I actually started packing his lunch. I started getting up earlier in the morning. Whether he ate it or not was up to him, but at least he had a lunchbox in his car and he had, snacks and iced tea and things he could grab and a sandwich so it's either you don't eat all day or you eat pizza and hot dogs. And, I think there's so many things, even as wives, that we can do, or family members, not even, because there's husbands that are in this also. But, like I said, this part of it goes back to the academy, just preparing families for what this job holds and how can we better assist our officers? How can we, as a family, maybe be a little bit healthier and make some healthier choices? I know with my husband, I had to learn in his career when he was on his days off, I had to let him, one, decompress, but I had to let him exercise. That was his therapy. That was his, the only way he knew to unwind. So as a wife, instead of, giving him a honey-do list, I really just allowed him to just be off and shut down. And I learned to carry most of that load. And I know as wives, it's not easy, or a spouse, it's not easy, or a partner, it's not easy. But these are things that we need to do to help them. And I think packing lunches is huge. And I think there's some great first responder nutritionists out there. They're not hard to find. I see them on social media. I see them on LinkedIn, just with recipes and ideas. And so I think anymore with social media, it's not even really that hard to find.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just had an interview with a nutritionist for a local fire company, actually for a local agency, a fire and police agency. And so she's on my podcast. So I think this one's coming out after that one. So go back a couple episodes back and you'll see a whole conversation with a nutritionist. So
that's great. That's great information.
So speak to that police wife or spouse who is in the middle of that diagnosis right now, who their partner has been diagnosed. What would you say to them?
I think they need to know they're not alone. I think that's why Blue Cancer Connect is so important. You aren't alone, whether it's the officer or the family. I think it's important that we don't leave our officers to battle this alone. It is a very dark place to be in with cancer, as a family, especially. I think it's very important that the departments support these families. We're not always seeing that. I think it's very important that their partners understand what comes with this, which is both it's debilitating. It's a very hard financial hit on families. And you have to know, as your brothers and sisters, they're not going to reach out and tell you. They're not going to tell you how bad this is. They're not going to tell you, hey, I'm drowning financially, or we can't make our mortgage payment. And we are seeing a lot of this. But I think as a spouse, you need to know that the department, I don't want to say just supports you so much. I know they supported me, but the love and support they gave my husband, that took so much off of me. And it really brought me a lot of peace knowing they had my back and they had his back. And I think it changes your journey. I really do.
So talk a little bit about your organization. What do you guys do, and how can people connect with you?
Well, the website is bluecancerconnect.org. We are nationwide. We will do, we're kind of we'll do anything. So reach out. Whether you're in that cancer diagnosis, one of our big things is we connect officers with other officers who are going through the same exact battle. And, we have found one of the biggest concerns with officers is, will I get back to work? Will I ever be able to see my job again? And that's a private battle they are going through. I'll say for any first responder or our military. So it's been very powerful connecting officers together. I know I tell them I would never understand what my husband went through. I will never understand what it was like being away from his partners, knowing things are going down and you can't be there and you don't have their back. One of my husband's partners was actually executed in the line of duty while he was off. And it was so difficult for him just to know he wasn't there. And these are things I can never understand. So I think that piece of it is really important. If you need second opinions, if you are having financial difficulties, if you're looking, we're tied to a lot of wellness for first responders. If you need therapy, your family needs therapy. If you need a ride, we have a lot of single officers. We have a lot of retired officers that are involved with this. So if you need a ride somewhere, I think because I'm a wife and I don't do this job, it's easier for me to reach out to departments and say, hey, one of your own is home and they are in a really tough place. More often, departments had no idea. And we need to break down this barrier to share what a cancer diagnosis looks like. So I think there's so many things that we can do. We have, a lot of our partners are not just on the cancer side, but we have a Camp for Kids that is completely free, and it's children whose parents have cancer. It's one of the most amazing organizations around. They're nationwide. We have End of Life Dreams, which we have another organization that will, if you're terminal, it's taken care of. We can give you End of Life Dreams. So I just think that connection. And then, I think what Blue Cancer Connect does is it allows our first responders to know you are not in this alone.
That's such an important message. And I know for you, being in the middle of this and talking about this a lot, there's probably, things that you struggle with. What do you do since this is the first responder wellness podcast, what do you do to take care of you?
I actually have stayed in therapy. I don't do well with funerals. I actually got to a place I was doing pretty good with them, and I went to a funeral. Actually, one of my board members is an officer, and he lost his dad to cancer. The funeral was about a month ago, and I'm not quite sure what happened, but it didn't go so well for me. I actually ended up having to leave, but I've made myself so self-aware that I keep a therapist. I know I can't do this and go back into death and grief and loss and be okay at all times. So I made that decision for myself. And I think as a leader of an organization, and when you go out there and you preach these things, the question is also asked to you, what are you doing for you? So I feel for me, that's best that I keep a therapist at all times. And it really has helped me a lot.
Well, that's great. Well, first of all, I'm sorry for your loss. I'm thankful for the work you're doing now and for the important work that you're doing around the country with our first responders and especially law enforcement. So thank you for that. Thank you for being on the program today and for sharing. Is there anything else that you would like to talk about that's front of, if anything that's front of mind for you that we haven't discussed?
I'd actually like to share a big event that we have coming up. We have partnered with the Firefighter Cancer Support Network. We are doing a Battle of the Badges basketball game out here in Southern California. It's a big fundraiser for us. And I want to give props to them. They are giving all of the money back to law enforcement. So I'm very thankful for them. But great event. It's out in Valencia, California, July 13th. If you are interested in being a sponsor or a donor, or, please reach out. You can go on the website, reach out to us. But I also want to share with people, I know we all ask for donations and we ask for these things, but, unfortunately it takes money to keep these things going. I think this is such a great cause to consider being a monthly donor, whether it's $5, $10, $15. But, we need to understand as law enforcement, our brothers and sisters in uniform are drowning financially with a cancer diagnosis. And I think this cause is so important. And I think these donations are so important. So we have been able to do some incredible things financially to help our officers. And we definitely want to keep that going and keep that piece of it going, because I think financially, it's a burden you don't need when you're fighting for your life. It's not just a financial burden, but it's a burden of, I might not make it. What is going to happen to my family? And in this moment, I'm completely overwhelmed. So I do encourage people to do that. And it could be a small amount, it could be a big amount, but this cause is extremely important.
Well, thank you. We'll make sure we put all those links in the show notes so people can have a place to go to make a contribution and donation and to learn more about what you guys do. Vickie, thank you so much for being on the program today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. And thank you for allowing me to share this cause. I am very, very grateful.
Thanks, Vickie, for joining me today on the podcast. I really do appreciate all the work that you are doing. And don't forget that you can order your agency's copy of the PTSD 911 film and educational toolkit for 10% off this month. Visit ptsd911movie.com/toolkit today. Thanks again for listening. Thanks for watching. And remember that you are not alone. And if you need someone to talk to and don't know where you can turn, you can dial 988 for help. Be sure to tune in again next week for another interview with an amazing first responder leader. Until then, be well, take care of yourself and those around you, and go out and do something great in the world.